Welcome to the Addiction Connection podcast, connecting the hope of the gospel with the heart of addiction. I'm your host, Mark Shaw, and I am joined by two special guests live in person, which I absolutely love. And they work and serve at the Salem for Youth Ranch. And I say they, Andrew in an official capacity, and then Kat in more of an unofficial capacity. Am I right?
Yep.
And so we're going to learn more about them and their story in just a minute. And a verse that Andrew said, this is Andrew held and Kat held. One of the verses he said that's really been on his mind and heart lately is Philippians 1:29. So I'm going to read 29 to 30 here for us now. For it has been granted to you that for the sake of Christ, you should not only believe in him, but also suffer for his sake. Engaged in the same conflict that you saw I had, and now hear that I still have. Now, verse 29 has really been, alive in your heart and something that God's just kind of called you into. And I know that for those that haven't watched the podcast with Terry yet, they may not know about Salem for Youth. So before we get into this verse, tell us a little bit about Salem for Youth. It's a residential boys program, and Andrew's going to tell us a little bit about that and what he does there, and then living on campus. I can't wait to hear about this.
So Salem for Youth is a boys residential Christian facility. We house 12 boys. The program is set to be 12 months, but the average stay is 13 to 15 months, depending on how the boy works to his goals that we set.
Sure.
Or if he's very rebellious and doesn't want to be held accountable on some things.
You mean boys can be rebellious?
Boys can be rebellious, yes, and sometimes don't want to listen.
Boys like me?
Boys like you, boys like me, boys like you.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yes.
And so how we have that set up is 6 of those boys during the day will go to school. We have a teacher that is in-house. The boys work online, and they're in school for a couple hours. And then the other 6 are split up between multiple vocations, where some will go to equine, where they learn to work with horses, ride horses, work with steer. The boys do learn how to rope. They rope practice dummies. They do eventually learn how to rope live steer. We have a photography vocation where they'll go around campus. They'll learn all sorts of aspects of photography. Mm-hmm. And we have a wood shop as well where they learn not just power tools, but hand tools where Gabe really spends time with these boys handcrafting furniture and very nice wood. And then we have multiple other activities. We have sports. The boys play soccer, basketball, track, swimming. They're involved in all those things. And then after those times, around that 3:30, they come to the cottage where I spend a lot of my time with the boys. And that time is to mimic kind of the home life. All the boys, all 12 of them, come at once. Let me back up. During the morning when those guys are in school and those guys invoke, they switch after a certain amount of time. So they flip-flop. So those boys in Vogue will go to school, and then those guys in school will go to Vogue. Yeah. And then after 3:30, we kind of mimic that home life where they all come together in the cottage.
Now all 12 are joined together
12
after that.
With just a few of us.
Wow.
And so now we start to work through some of the items of the day where there is homework involved. Also throughout the day, they meet with Joe, who's our biblical counselor, and they may meet with Billy, who is kind of like a life coach, and they are given goals and tasks, and they may not like those goals, or they may not understand those goals.
Right.
And so we just kind of help walk through that, make sure their homework is getting done, making sure they're getting along with the other boys. And during that time, those boys are dealing with anger. They're dealing with social interactions or depression and all those things. So we have an eye for that as that's happening, as well as taking guys for different activities. We have the opportunity to take guys to, let's say, the weight room. And it's not just to get strong and to lift weights, but it's, hey, why don't you 4 come with me We go to the weight room, and we do lift weights, and we do get to do man stuff. But the idea is to talk about Christ, to talk about some of the struggles or the issues that they're working on. Because generally, a lot of boys, when you sit them in a chair or on a couch across from a table or a desk, they're not always that prone to talk. But when you get a boy in a weight room, you lift weights with them, you may disclose some things and just talk to you. Or even building furniture, riding a horse, and all those things. So while we do the counseling, yes, formally at a desk, that does work. It also happens in various aspects and activities throughout the ranch.
Yeah, yeah. No, I love the approach of your program, and for most people who may not know, I mean, Salem for Youth Ranch is probably. It's the only one I know of that really has a biblical, Christ-centered approach. These guys, guy and gal, are committed to these kids to teach them. They don't consider themselves to be in the role of a parent. They're doing some of the responsibilities and care and love and that kind of thing, but coming alongside, not replacing parents, but being there for these boys in a way that's like the local church. I mean, it's supposed to be modeled after that, right?
Yes.
So that's the deal. Well, and what's your role there? What do you do there?
So right now I wear multiple hats. I am cottage staff, which is that after vocation and after school time that I spend with the boys. I also serve as the addictions counselor.
Yep.
And then associate pastor. So when Terry is out and gone, we do take turns
you get
preaching
to
and
preach.
teaching in the chapel. So we do have church service on campus.
Yeah.
We don't go to an outside church. We do preach and teach.
And talking to you in the past, I know this is just where God has you. I mean, this seems like a perfect fit, hand in glove, that you're fulfilling God's call on your life.
Yes, this has been a long road. I mean, if I could just share a little bit about my
Tell
story
us,
and
yes.
how we
And
got
Kat
here.
can talk too in a minute.
Oh, she can. She's got lots of stories.
I got lots of stories, yeah.
Well, she's here to keep Andrew honest. That's really what we need.
Yeah, so I was adopted. I was a child of adoption by Christian Jews, by Messianic Jews.
Wow.
Actually, so I was raised in church. My parents went to church. I would not say they were godly people, and
right.
really living out Christ-like. But they did take me to church. We went to church Tuesday night prayer, Wednesday night, Sunday night. So I was raised in church, but I was very rebellious as a young man, very angry. My dad was a little abusive, so we did struggle with that. He was a Vietnam vet. He was a Navy corpsman. So he has a lot of struggles that he's dealing with as well.
Yeah.
So through some abuse and just being angry, not knowing who I was, identity issues. I'm living with Messianic Jews. I'm half white, half black, trying to fit in just culturally in all these different areas.
Yeah.
I grew up in that.
Can be very confusing, all
was
that
very
stuff,
confusing. It was.
Yeah.
So at a young age of 14, 15, started using marijuana and just living that rebellious lifestyle. Didn't want to listen to teachers, didn't want to listen to parents, which eventually had me moving out at 16 on my own, living in a 2-bedroom apartment with like 6 other teens.
Yeah, wow.
Kind of in this goth culture, of this heavy metal culture, which turned to a lot of drug use. This is South Florida, and so there was a lot of cocaine use, hallucinogens, mushrooms, ecstasy.
Wow.
Wasn't building an addiction to one drug. It was really, first of all, just suppressing truth and unrighteousness.
Right.
But not wanting to face reality, not wanting to deal with reality, always looking for the next high, and kind of got the identity of I would mix multiple drugs and wanted to be the best drug user and being the cool guy. I'll do all the drugs and let's stay up the latest.
Yeah.
And we never have to end the party kind of culture. Well, that carried on till I was 18. to where I knew I needed to change. Didn't know how, so I joined the Marine Corps, and I figured that's it. This will fix me. The Marine Corps will fix me. And what happened was I learned a lot of good things in the Marine Corps,
Sure.
a good work ethic,
Yep.
some strong discipline in there. I also learned how to drink heavily in the Marine Corps. It's founded in 10 Tavern, founded in a bar, so there is a culture of alcoholism.
Yeah. Wow.
That is there. And
Didn't know that.
during a training exercise in Yuma, Arizona, an airplane, it's Osprey, so it takes off like a helicopter and flies like an airplane, had crashed and killed our weapons platoon, so we lost a lot of Marines, which kind of drove me back to some drug use of marijuana, which I ended up getting kicked out of the Marine Corps for that.
Wow.
And this is in 1999. That was kind of the culture. You can't smoke weed because that's a drug.
Yeah,
But
don't
you have
do
raging
marijuana.
alcoholics serving who don't have licenses that are
Because alcohol's not a drug.
Alcohol's not a drug, apparently. So that's how they looked at it back then. And during that Marine Corps time, I got married real quick because I was trying to find some kind of sense of family, and so I was married to my first wife, and then to quickly we had separated. Ended up, she and my daughter, she got pregnant and gave birth, and ended up moving to Illinois.
Wow.
So this beach kid from Florida followed and kind of went after that to kind of be around my daughter. But I didn't know how to be a dad. My dad wasn't a good dad. Even though we went to church and we did those things, I still wanted to drink. I still wanted to party. So drugs and alcohol really drove my life a lot. And so ended up not working out, and so they moved to a different state. And at this point, I started getting involved with different gang members in Illinois and getting into that crowd. So now I'm in a different crowd. Feeling just I didn't join the gang, but just would be in there just to seem tough and to kind of have that camaraderie. In that,
Sure.
and some danger and fighting. I liked fighting and doing drugs, and so I just kind of.
Now, about how old are you at this moment?
At this moment, 21.
21 right now. Okay.
21 in this
part.
moment.
All right.
And so lived that life for a couple of years where I ended up just living a terrible life and fighting. Just constant selling drugs, doing drugs.
Wow.
And so
You're
dad.
such a gentle soul now. You know? That it's just, wow.
It was rough. And so my dad had gotten worried about me to the point where he bought me a plane ticket to move back home to Florida to straighten out. And so I went and partied with a friend one last time. Well, that one last time, we ended up partying and smoking crystal meth. And so I ended up not on the plane. I was too high to get on the plane. And that girl, particular time, her boyfriend knew the meth cook. And then there was a life of just crystal meth that took me down a path of knowing a cook, getting it for free, and just partying and just being very disruptive. Ended up homeless. Ended up just living a rough life of just that crystal meth. Just smoking crystal meth, even be up because you're up for days at a time. Trying to function in that capacity. So this is about age 25. Working through that, and then so living in a drug house and a party house. That's where it was at, and this beautiful lady to my right came to the door with marijuana. Huge marijuana user, and we actually met in the drug house doing drugs and partying.
This is such an interesting story. This is good. I mean, this is better than a book or made-for-TV movie or whatever.
So,
can I jump in?
Hey, let her jump in.
I'm gonna just jump in because I want to kind of tell my story a little bit where our world's kind of
this is good.
That's probably good. So I was born in Europe. My mom has been a fantastic mother my whole life.
Wow.
But
Europe.
In Europe, yep. And then I moved over here when I was 1. I don't really remember a lot of my childhood, but I think it's because my dad was in and out, and it was just, I remember going to Germany. I remember visiting my family over there several times. I never went to church ever. Like Terry was talking earlier today about, we grow up in VBS and we go to church. I never did any of that.
Right.
I didn't. I don't think anyone ever talked to me about Jesus until I met Andrew. So I grew up in Danvers, Illinois. It's a very small town. And then I moved to Bloomington when I was about 15. My parents ended up getting divorced. My dad wasn't very present at the time, and he was sleeping with other women around on my mom and stuff like that. And my mom had already went through kind of a lot moving from Europe to here.
Right.
She was already a nurse in Europe, and then when we moved over here, she had to go all the way back through nursing school. And I do remember my mom being, working late and always studying because she had to re-get her nursing degree while she was here. Also barely knowing English because she's German.
Oh, yeah.
And so she struggled a lot through that with my dad being not present,
Sure.
And so they ended up separating when I was 15. And I moved into Bloomington, and that's where I started getting into drugs and alcohol. My dad kind of had introduced me already to alcohol. He didn't really care that I drank or anything like that. He would drink with me and my friends and stuff like that. So I already kind of knew about it before I moved into town. But then when I moved into town, I'm now in a city. So I was in a city. I was meeting new friends. I was, learning how to party. I just kind of grew up in a similar lifestyle where I was just drinking and doing drugs all the time. I finished high school. But at that time, it did cause tension between me and my mom, obviously.
Yeah.
Not because she was a bad mom, but just because I was hurting from all the stuff that was happening,
Sure.
with my parents. So my dad is now not in the picture anymore, and I'm, trying to figure out my life and figuring that, guys will love me if I sleep with them, or, that kind of stuff was happening. So I was
Sure.
dating around and that kind of stuff, and I moved out when I was 17 also. I started dating a guy, and he was very verbally abusive to me, and it was just wasn't a great fit. Well, I had dated him for about 3 years, and when I was turning 20, we had finally separated, and then on around my 21st birthday is when I met Andrew. So that's when we had separated. I remember going to my friend's house, and I met Andrew, and I was like, "Oh, look at that guy on the couch."
Yeah. What's not to like?
And then that's kind of where our story together kind of collides.
Yeah.
And we end up kind of meeting Jesus together. So
What's interesting about that is like everything up to this point, it's almost like you guys are living the same parallel life. You haven't yet connected up until you're 21. And you were, 25 at that point when you met or so? Or?
I'm 37 and you're 42.
Oh, don't
24.
So you're,
maybe 24,
Yeah,
25.
24,
So, yeah.
25, yeah.
But you guys, I mean, very similar, like identity things going on and the drugs and all the stuff goes along with that. And so you're living that life, and now you meet at 21. So now we'll go back to you now. Well, 24, 21.
Yeah. So then we drank and we partied together. Well, I really partied. And she would kind of help contain me and those kinds of things. And but for a while,
we can stay away from all of those in between stories where we were together in those moments.
There was bar fights. That we would get into. And different things. So it was crazy, and eventually we kind of broke up, and then we ended up living above a bar, which where all alcoholics and drug users should live, above a bar, right? So we're there, and after one night of drinking, one of the last things I remember is taking a handful of Xanax, and that lady saying "see ya," knowing that I was going to be really messed up. Yeah. But that's just what I did. I just drank a lot, whatever it was, would just party. Ended up coming upstairs and just wrecking the apartment.
I was not home during this time. I was home.
So all sorts of foolish things in the apartment. And so she had eventually come home, and she had had enough. I mean, we had been multiple bar fights, and I was just causing all sorts of trouble and mayhem. And so she was going to leave. And in that drunken stupor, the next day, still kind of in a fog, she's coming to pack her stuff, and Christ grabbed me. Now, again, I'm raised in the church. I had adults pouring in, sharing the gospel to me as a young man, which I rebelled against, but people poured into me as a young man.
Yeah.
Here she is, she's getting ready to leave, and God just said, nope. And so I told her, said, don't leave. We are going to serve Jesus, and I'm done.
Wow.
Like, we're just going to serve Jesus.
Yeah.
To where she's like, what?
At this point, I think
Yeah.
he's insane. At this point,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like, this something.
He's still
what is
drinking.
it? Yes, yes.
You're in a drunken stupor or whatever at this point, or
This
this
is hungover
right
kind of the
after
next
hungover
day.
the
I'm
next-
not sober.
Gotcha.
yet.
It's
Right.
about
I'm-
2:00 in the
You're- yeah.
afternoon
Yeah,
at this
I'm
point.
still
Yeah.
sick,
Yes.
still feeling
Yeah.
like no, but
you're
this
wow.
is it. Said don't leave. And what we ended up doing was going to there's a corner store church where during my time of being homeless and had been there, had been served, there
Yeah.
ministered to there.
Wow.
We went right there and we said, listen, we're here to serve
great.
Jesus and we're here to serve the church.
Well, he
Yeah.
said he was there to serve
yes,
Jesus
me.
and serve the church, and I just kind of rode along with it.
Yeah,
'cause I'm
right.
like,
Whatever makes this crazy
Yeah,
man
yeah,
right, yeah.
exactly.
stop.
Yeah.
I'm for, and so
Wow.
and that was it with the drugs and alcohol. So you're talking cocaine, meth,
Wow.
all of it.
All of it.
It's just
Done. Wow.
and just going to serve Jesus. And then it was a short time after that a chaplain with the Olympics, he was a South African missionary, came in and he shared about his work of working with youth in Russia and shared the gospel at the end of that presentation. And then so she gave her life to Christ. And so that gospel message saved her. And then we got married shortly after that. And then
We felt like that was the next
we're
right
married,
thing
and this
to
is
do.
what the
We're
Word of
living
God
together,
says.
you know.
Yeah. And so her life radically changed when we got married, and there wasn't a consistent youth worker in that corner store church. So we said, this was the Jesus House, a great place, and we said, we'll help. We don't know what that means, but someone needs to be here for the youth. And then so our journey of youth work kind of evolved from there and working with neighborhood kids, and 14 years later,
Wow.
still working with teens.
Yeah.
I can see how God was pursuing me even in the moments of like our not soberness. You know, I remember one night I was walking, we were walking around the lake. I don't know if I ever told you this or not, but
White Oak Lake?
yep, we were walking around White Oak Lake, and I remember talking to Andrew, and we're not sober at this time. We're not, we're just,
Yeah.
you know, I'm angry because my dad is not around, and, you know, my mom is always working really hard. And like I said, my mom's always been great, and we have
Sure,
a wonderful
sure.
relationship. So I'm mad that she's had to go through all of this stuff. And I remember saying, like, he was talking to me about God for some reason, and I'm like, there's no such thing as God. Like, there can't be, because, like, look at all this crap that my mom has went through. Like, she's this wonderful woman, and my dad basically treated her like trash, and she came over to this country, and she's going through all this stuff. And I remember him saying something like, the stars in heaven proclaim God's goodness and like who he is. And I think that was the end of the conversation. I don't remember me asking a lot of questions, but I remember that moment of God like saying that. And then I remember one night, Drew was we were having a date night, and I remember him washing my feet. And this is, we're not sober at this time, you know what I mean? And so,
right.
but he knows what's happening from, you know, like, he's just trying to serve me and be kind, right? And I remember him washing my feet, and we were talking and
Flirting a little bit.
yeah,
probably.
exactly, probably a little bit, but at the same time, like, that was that, you know, like, I see how God was pursuing me in those moments too, like
Yeah.
preparing me for these. And I think those moments I always will remember, because I'm like, oh man, God was there even when we were in
Yes.
our sin and our,
I love
you know,
that.
like those small moments, God was just like, hey, I am here, just a little bit at a time, you know.
That's so important. I think so many people don't often see that in the dark cloud of using, you're still not sober and all that, God is still quite at work, maybe more than what, you know, I mean, with all that you guys are doing, he's sparing your life, he's leading you, he's guiding, you know, even though you're in active rebellion, same in my life as well. So wonderful for people to hear that. That is such a good point.
So yes, freedom without 12 steps,
Yes.
Yeah.
yeah.
without
Yeah.
man philosophy.
Yeah.
It was the work of the Holy Spirit, raising a dead man to life. So
I thought you could only get sober with the 12 steps. How about that?
You'd be
You mean-
amazed.
Yeah, this is a testimony
Yeah,
or two without it.
I
Yes.
remember telling my
Yeah.
mom, once I gave my life to Christ, I was like, something is so different. And she was like, what are you talking about? I was like, Drew and I have literally not touched drugs or alcohol in weeks. I was
Yeah.
like, my mom was concerned because he was always kind to my mom, and,
Sure.
he's always really had kind of a gentle spirit, unless he was drinking or
Yeah.
using, you know what I mean?
I don't
And that
wanna see
always
that
changes
guy.
a person,
Yeah.
yeah.
No.
But she was always concerned, like, oh man, Drew's, doing all this stuff. And I told her one day, I was like, it's just different. And she was like, okay. She was like a little
Yeah.
bit concerned at first, but my mom loves Andrew now. She's
Yeah.
like her favorite.
What's
so.
not to love?
I
I love him.
See?
No, that's cool. That's cool. So you guys get married.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're what? What? How old were you when
20,
you
it
got
was
married?
2009,
It was
so
27.
27 and
Came-
25
5 or 24, yeah. Yeah.
So you get married,
Yes.
and then
So the
where do you want to go from there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we started kind of what we were having was there was a lot of issues with youth at that time. With hybrid gangs in the neighborhood, these
Yeah.
are
Especially where
little
we were
cliques
living,
off
yeah.
of you have GDs, you have Stones, and these were like little cliques within that. So,
Yeah.
But there would be groups of teens, like 50 teens, and then another huge group of teens just clashing in the street. They'd ripping off like pieces
We
of
would
the
be in the middle
porch
of
and
worship,
mailboxes,
and they would
Oh,
come
wow.
down in the middle of the
just
street and
huge
just
fights.
fight. Yeah.
Wow.
and shootings. And so we were saying, well, how do we reach these teens? And
Yeah.
they're not going to come into the church.
No.
So God started calling us to work with these teens at this Friendship Park. It's kind of the park that's in the middle of all this. We said, we're going to, I don't know, do worship music and maybe have popcorn every now and then. We'll just kind of
Yeah.
share the gospel.
Yeah.
And so at that time, we're really influenced by, this is where Answers in Genesis comes in, where I'm like, man, I'm really loving this creation apologetics stuff.
Right.
And also Dare to Share, which is all about learning how to share the gospel, but training teens to share with teens.
Yeah.
So you're training teens to share the gospel with other teens and coaching youth pastors. And so we have that information. And so we said, let's just go to them and do it. And so we started partnering with the police department in the city of Bloomington. And we just started meeting with teens where they were at. And then when there was times of inclement weather or when it gets wintertime, we partnered with another kind of church that had a space in that area, and we just met with teens and just shared the gospel with teens, and that grew to having a lot of teens. There's a lot of heartaches in there because we have teens in jail for murder, teens that were killed.
Sure.
And then we kind of put that under City Life, which is a branch of Youth for Christ. They have Campus Life and City Life. And the reason for that was it was a nationally known ministry, but we wanted to get into the schools as well, so that we can get into the high school.
Sure.
And so we transitioned to that. We still did the same things, but
Yeah.
under that Youth for Christ banner. And
Yeah.
the superintendent of Bloomington High School was a Christian, and he opened the door for us to come in and work in the high school. So we did that all the way up to just 2 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So we were with kind of urban kids in West Bloomington and did that. But it was because I did a tour of Salem for Youth Ranch
Yeah.
about 5 years ago. Mac asked me to come and just check the place out.
Yeah.
And so I did.
That's how it starts.
I did a tour, and it was like,
That's how they
"Man,
get ya."
This place is awesome.
I know.
It was just unbelievable. It has all
Yeah.
the things that a lot of places are trying to do, especially
Right.
in urban settings. Like, man, I wish we had a wood shop. Kids need to really learn
Yeah.
how to work with their hands.
I
learn how to
love
use
that.
tools,
Yeah.
or weld and just all these skills. Or
Ah.
horses. I mean, we had
Boys
kids that
love that.
It's
that
such
didn't
a
even know
lost
horses
art
were
for
in
boys.
America.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. yeah.
They haven't left
I believe it.
Chicago
Yeah.
streets.
Yeah,
And so-
right.
Oh yeah, we had kids who have never didn't. One girl asked me, she was like, "I didn't know horses were in America," and I was like, "Are you serious?" Like we went and took her horseback riding.
Yeah.
But as far as like the ranch stuff, I feel like that's such a lost art for boys. Like they don't
Yeah.
know how to change tires anymore, or like do woodworking, and there are obviously
Yeah,
boys
yeah.
out there who learn
Sure.
that stuff. But in the city, It's not.
No.
It's not.
That's
The
right.
boys
The
don't.
opportunities
Yeah, the
aren't
opportunities
there.
aren't there, and
Yeah.
you know they come from a lot of fatherless homes where they don't
Yeah.
have dads teaching them how to do
Right.
those things. You know, and so like Drew said, the ranch is just such a cool
It is.
place.
I haven't been there yet.
But you will be.
You will be. You'll have to
invited
check
me,
it
and
out. Yeah.
Careful, that's how they get you.
I know. I don't want them to get me.
But go ahead. You were getting to the part where you started at the ranch, so yeah.
So yeah, now we're at the ranch. Now take me through Philippians 1:29 for a second. For it's been granted to you that for the sake of Christ you should not only believe in him, but also suffer for his sake.
But to suffer for his sake. Yeah. So, one is just that it's been granted to you.
Yeah.
Right? You've been allowed. Here's this gift.
Yes.
For you to suffer for Christ. And
Yeah.
I think we should take heed to that. And in this situation, I mean, he's been stoned, he's been beaten, he's been imprisoned, he's in house arrest. In this, and he's saying to keep the same mind. And so, yeah, right now we may not be killed for Christ, but there's a lot of suffering for not only just believing the gospel, but to really go out and make disciples who make disciples and sharing the gospel. So we talk about a social death that you must face. So you got to go to maybe your friends or your coworkers, your old friends that, hey, I found Christ. They may want nothing to do with you. So all of a sudden you're you're the weirdo.
Yeah.
People have been fired. Kat's been fired for praying with someone at her job at a dentist's office.
Wow.
And it is a suffering. There's a labor there that to be all in, you know, because we want to hold the gospel at the highest. There's no deeper truth than the gospel. You're not going to search this book and find a deeper truth than the gospel. So we want to hold to that, but then share it, and that involves a lot of suffering, of dying to self and humility. And so we need to be armed with that, and also be armed with, you don't know where God is going to take you. You may go to Africa and you may die for the gospel.
That's
so
right.
we just want to be always arming ourselves and be thinking of that to, I need to suffer well. I think a lot of our prayers are, God, I think it was you, the bubble, or at the IABC, they were talking about being wrapped in bubble wrap prayers.
Yeah.
And all these safe prayers.
That sounds like me.
But to be ready to suffer for Christ. It may not be locked in prison. But it's definitely, there's a social death that you must be willing to die. And it's awkward. I love Dare to Share's phrase that awkward is awesome. So be ready, because you go up to a stranger or I actually think there's something harder than sharing the gospel than with a family member. Yeah. It's for me, it's much easier to share the gospel with a stranger.
Yep, I get it.
Than family members. And it's awkward, and it's your palms get sweaty,
Right.
and you may be rejected.
They're comfortable arguing with you. That's I think that's the thing. They're comfortable telling you exactly how they feel about what you think.
But I mean, it's going to cost you time. It can cost money, and I think you need to be willing to
suffer,
to do that, and to suffer for Christ, because that's what Christ did for us.
Yeah. Well, God then led you to Salem for youth. You've been there 2 years.
2 years.
And then now you moved about a month or so ago?
Yeah, about a month and a half, 2 months, from West Bloomington to rural Flanagan in the middle of cornfields and soybeans.
I mean, if somebody had told you that, 20 years, how old are you?
I'm 41.
40. So if somebody told you 22 years ago, you're going to live in rural Flanagan, I mean, you'd have said...
I would have been like, you're crazy.
You couldn't envision that back then at all.
No, because he's a beach guy.
Yeah,
he likes the beach. You know, he likes.
He's not a cornfield.
No, beach or mountains. I can do. I can do mountains too.
Sure.
I was definitely beach or mountains, but you started working, or I started working there.
Yeah.
And the draw is there, and I am a firm believer. You know, we lived in West Bloomington and stayed in areas. Because that's where we were doing mission, and that's where we wanted to be. We didn't want to kind of be in and out. Guys wanted to be available. We wanted to be where the shooting is, where the heartache is, and to be available. And we had kids staying in our houses weeks, months, daily coming by. So we wanted to be just where they are doing ministry. And so it was kind of the same when I got to the ranch, like, oh, this is awesome, but I don't like driving 45 minutes back to West Bloomington.
Right.
I want to be available and just suffer. You want to give yourself up and empty yourself out. And of course, it's the joy of the Lord that gives us strength, and you need health and balance. I know all those things. But
I think about the verse, he who has been forgiven much, or she in that case, loves much, And so you're willing to enter into these boys' lives, to live on the ranch, and to be available. Because life, ministry, opportunities to lead people to Christ happen, not just in that prescribed little counseling room, once every other week or every week, but in the under the, what do they call it, the shade tree conversations or shady tree conversations. The living life, you're working out with the boys and they start to talk about something. I mean, it's the same way with teens in other regular homes. Like when the kids want to talk, you got to kind of seize that moment.
Absolutely.
They don't always want to talk.
We have had teens ourselves. I have a teenage boy, and when he gets ready to talk, you have to be ready.
Yeah,
and
right.
sometimes that's midnight.
Yeah,
Sometimes there's a crisis at 1 a.m.
That's
Those kinds of things. And so if you're just thinking you're gonna have successful youth ministry by I'm only gonna do this from 8 to 12.
I'm gonna clock in, and
that's not it.
No, boy. Sometimes I think people feel like it's just me. Why don't other people care about this? Especially when you lay down your lives like you guys are. I think you can feel that way, like, man, this is lonely, or why don't other people do this? Maybe you don't look at that or think about that.
We do.
But it's hard. Yeah. I mean, it's hard. And yet you've got other people there at the ranch who are laying down their lives too, maybe in different degrees.
Absolutely.
Maybe not as much in this way, or maybe more in this other way. But you guys have a team there, and so it's not just you guys doing. You have about 23 staff. And
yes. Yeah, it only works because of the team.
Yeah.
This doesn't work if it's just the Helds trying to do that. It falls apart quickly. This is hugely, whether there's guys part-time, full-time, or volunteer, an hour a week. I mean, it's every person is pouring in, and it's awesome how the Holy Spirit orchestrates conversations where all the adults are kind of saying the same thing to a boy. Sometimes it takes 23 different adults to say the same thing to the boy before he finally gets it.
Right.
So it's definitely a team work. But we do try to encourage volunteers to pour in and to come all in. And we try to encourage too to bring your wives, to say anything to volunteers, bring your wives and family with you to ministry. Don't separate it out as this is my job, so I do this, and then I clock out of this, and then go home to my family.
Yeah.
Because then you're always going to be divided with ministry and family. Bring your family along with you, and see how what your wife does, or your children, and to watch them grow as well.
Yeah.
One of the most refreshing things I think I've heard on the ranch is most of the conversations I've had with the guys, the ones that I have continual conversations with. I don't think I've met every single person on the ranch yet, but when I'm talking to the guys, they're like, I love my job. I love my ministry. I love the boys. Yeah. I'm all in for these boys. And that is so refreshing, because you do sometimes when there's millions of Christians around the world, but they're not always all giving every single portion of themselves. We've dealt with that in youth ministry ourselves, where we're trying to lead a ministry and people have lives, they have families, and they have things. And so you sometimes feel like you're pulling on every volunteer to try to get them to do, the right thing, or trying to get them to show up. And you're not expecting every single thing from them, because not every single person is called to do exactly what we're doing, But when I got to the ranch, it's like every single volunteer and staff member there is called to exactly what they're supposed to be doing. They have the unique giftings to be there and giving their lives to the boys. And that is just incredible and refreshing to me.
And here's what makes it worth it. Here's what gives us the strength to do that. And I think people need to see that is when a boy comes to Christ,
Mm.
then you look back and you go, all the hours,
Yeah.
all the sweat, all the tears, worth it. So is not one more life worth more? So then it's that drive to just keep giving and to keep serving.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. Salem for Youth Ranch, boys program in Illinois. Just so you guys know, to pray for them, financially support their ministry. They're not asking for cash and money. I am for them, not directly to their pockets, but it supports them and helps them. And a ministry like this needs financial help because they don't get federal funds and state funds and any of that. So I hope that you'll financially support them. I hope you'll pray for them. But it is a very unique place, and I think it's a lot like a church. Some people won't like this, but when you talk about, like, some people are noses, some people are hands, some people are ears, some people are feet, some people are. It's a body ministry that functions like the description there we have in Corinthians. Of this body life. People are called, like you just talked about, and then they're uniquely in that role where they're gifted and they use that gift to serve and to do whatever. You guys are like that too. It really does function a lot like a church. And some people won't like me to hear that, but that's really what I see at Salem for Youth. And I recommend anybody who has a son that they'd like to send there to consider this program. And the reason I wanted to feature you guys and Terry in that other podcast is just to make sure people know who they're sending their kids to. That's a big decision. And you guys aren't trying to replace parents. You're just trying to come alongside and help the parents.
Yes.
And I love that. I love everything about the ministry, eager to visit and come out and see you guys at your new home.
Yes, absolutely.
On the ranch one of these days. So, but yeah, thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
And being so honest about your testimony. Because I think it's hopeful for people to hear what God can do in a surrendered life, and
absolutely
just neat. And everybody's story is different,
Yeah.
I think that brings in the uniqueness of what I was saying earlier about each one of the staff members, because the fact that Drew's doing addictions counseling, I think it was said yesterday, who said it, like, you can't expect the kids to come
They're not coming to
go
church.
through what unless you've been through it.
What
Terry
in
was
that
saying,
way.
I can't remember the exact thing, but
Right.
Drew's been through it. Like, we've
Oh,
been
man.
through that.
What a testimony.
Where you've got that.
Yeah. And you did our commissioning addictions biblical counselor training process.
I did.
So you're one of our CABCs.
Yes.
Andrew Held, he's on our website. And just a real treasure, real blessing to me. And I just glad we could spend some time together this weekend. So a little bit of time. So
Yes, sir.
good.
Yes, sir.
Hopefully more days ahead. So.
Yes.
Well, good. Well, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for listening. Take care and God bless.